Maciej Doksa w kujawsko-pomorskiej e-Szkole w studiu, w sali lekcyjnej. Dzień dobry, dobry wieczór, to oznacza lekcję języka angielskiego. A co dziś na tapecie? No to już sam prowadzący powie najlepiej. Dobry wieczór raz jeszcze.
Dobry wieczór, albo właściwie dzień dobry. Dzisiaj będziemy rozmawiać o zdaniach warunkowych, tak zwane Conditional Sentences. A fascinating subject. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, as I said before, today we are going to talk about quite a fascinating subject, a grammar subject, conditional sentences. Something that very often is a source of frustration for students, a source of problems, but actually the issue is not so complicated as we all think. So, generally you have to remember that in English there are four let's say basic conditional sentences, 0, 1, 2, and 3. The so-called conditional sentences, type 0, type 1, type 2, type 3. And well, first of all, before we talk about conditional zero, let's talk about the conditional sentence in general. What is it? Well, conditional sentence is usually, not always, but usually a sentence which contains two parts. One part is the part which in English usually, not always, but usually contains the word if. And this part of the sentence introduces a condition, czyli warunek. And we have the other part of the sentence which shows the possible result if this condition is met, if it is fulfilled. Okay? So there are always two parts of a condition, not always, usually two parts of a conditional sentence. Again, in one part we have usually the word if, and there we have the condition, what if, and the second part we have the result, possible result of meeting this condition. All right, conditional zero. This is the easiest of the all conditionals. As you can see here, it expresses the constant truths, the situations which are repeatable, which are constant, which always happen in the same way. The laws of physics, I don't know, chemistry, nature, things like that. Generally, things that always happen in the same way. So they are constant. And how is this conditional sentence built? Well, the sentence is built in a very, very simple way. As you can see in the first part of the sentence, the if part, the conditional part, we have present simple. So we say if something happens, and then in the second part the result is also in present simple. So we also say that something else happens. And the most important thing, it is always like that. Look at the examples. If I eat too much, I put on weight. Always. Okay? It's a constant thing. It always happens in this way. So if somebody says a sentence like this in zero conditional, it means that it's always the same. It always happens in this way. If I eat too much, I put on weight. Second sentence. If you throw a stone into water, it sinks. Well, this is the law of physics, yes. The stone, basically, I think all stones will sink into water, so it always happens like that. So it's a constant thing, yes. Always, if you throw a stone into water, it sinks, at least on Earth. If she doesn't work, she doesn't get money. Well, this is the general truth, yes. In most cases, for most people, this is true. If we don't work, we don't get any money. Well, of course, there are always examples. There are probably some people who don't work and they still get some money. But generally, at least in this sentence for this person, if she doesn't work, she doesn't get money. So as you can see, these are constant situations that always happen in this way, and we use only the present simple tense in both parts of this conditional. Okay? All right, so because conditional zero is not very complicated, I suggest we move on to the next conditional, conditional one. And this conditional sentence, this type of conditional sentence, generally refers to one single particular situation in the future. And I think future is the key word here. So generally in this conditional we say what will happen in the future if. Czyli po polsku, co będzie jeśli, co będzie jeżeli. So as I said, these sentences, conditional one sentences, they always refer to the future, okay? And they always refer to one specific situation. Unlike zero conditional, which refers to the situation which repeats itself, which always happens in this way. Here we talk about one single specific event in the future that will happen or will not happen if something happens or not. And what grammar forms, what structures do we use in this conditional? Well, basically in the conditional part, so in the if part, so after if, we use present simple, always, almost always. And in the second part, the result of this condition, well, basically, usually, typically, we use the future simple tense. So, for example, the first of the sentences given here. If you finish early, we will go to the cinema. Or the second one, if he doesn't come, we won't do it. Okay? So, as you can see, after if you have present simple, and in the second part you have future simple. You have to be careful about the present simple after if. Why? Because in Polish, if we translate these sentences, you don't get present tense, you get future tense. In Polish we will say jeśli skończysz szybciej, albo jeśli on nie przyjdzie. Czyli tak jak widzicie, po if w języku polskim tam występuje czas przyszły. Natomiast w angielskim czas present simple, czyli czas teraźniejszy. Na to trzeba uważać, bo to bardzo często jest źródłem pomyłek. Okay, so in the second part, as I said, you can use future simple. We usually use the future simple tense, but not always, not necessarily. Sometimes it is possible to use a modal verb in the present form. So look at the sentence number 3. If you finish early, you can go out. Okay? You can go out. Can, it's a modal verb. Just like in Polish. Jeśli skończysz szybciej, możesz iść na dwór, możesz wyjść. Another option in the second part of this sentence is the imperative, czyli tryb rozkazujący. So, example sentence number 4. If you do your homework, call me. Jeśli zrobisz zadanie domowe, zadzwoń do mnie. Call me is the imperative, tryb rozkazujący. So as you can see, these sentences in the first conditional, they actually have the same options as we have in Polish. So, of course, in the first part of the sentence after if, it's different because we use the future tense and they use the present tense. But in the second part, it's basically the same. So there are basically the same options that we have in the Polish language. So you can have the future simple or the modal verb or an imperative. All right. Now let's take a look at conditional sentences number 2. As you can see, these sentences say what would happen now or in the future if. Czyli po polsku, co by było gdyby. And this is a very big difference between 0-1 conditional and the second conditional, because in 0 conditional and the first conditional, we say jeśli, jeżeli in Polish. So the sentences, when they are translated into Polish, they usually contain the word jeśli, jeżeli. But the second conditional, in the second conditional, if is translated into Polish as gdyby. To już jest tak zwane gdybanie. I zapamiętajcie sobie, że to jest gdybanie na temat teraźniejszości lub przyszłości, czyli co by było teraz lub co by było w przyszłości, gdyby coś innego się stało lub też nie. Oczywiście też można gdybać na temat przeszłości, ale to nie w tym conditionalu, to za chwilę o tym sobie powiemy. Okay, so what forms do we use in the second conditional? Well, again, after if, so in this conditional part of the sentence, we use past simple, usually. In the second part, where we have the result of the condition, we have would plus infinitive. So, okay, would do or would plus infinitive, yes? And here I have to say you have to be careful about, again, the first part, the conditional part after if, because in the Polish language you have tryb przypuszczający. Gdybym więcej zarabiał, gdybym mieszkał w Japonii. So it is quite, I would say, tempting for us to use would after if, but this is a mistake. In the second conditional after if, you can't use would. You have to use past simple. Okay? Would is in the other part of the sentence. So let's take a look at some examples. If I had a car, I would travel a lot. Gdybym miał samochód, dużo bym podróżował. Teraz. Czyli odnosi się to do teraźniejszości. And again, you can see after if you have past tense, if I had a car. In the other part of the sentence, you have would plus infinitive. I would travel. Another sentence of this type, if I didn't know you, I would believe you. Gdybym cię nie znał, to bym ci wierzył. Okay? So again, after if you have past simple, in the second part you have would plus infinitive. The third sentence, if I was rich, if I were rich, I wouldn't work. Gdybym był bogaty, nie pracowałbym. So again, as you can see, after if you have past tense, was, were. In the second part, in the other part, you have would plus infinitive. Now, as you can see, I have marked the words was and were with red color. Why? Why do we have both options here? Because in the second conditional, after if in English, it is actually possible to use the word were for all the persons. So you can say, if I were, if you were, if he were, if she were, if it were, if we were, if you were, if they were. So you can always use were, but the important thing is you don't have to. You can still use was in the first and third person singular. So after I and after he, she, it, you can still use was or were. It's a little bit, well, funny, but, well, in English you have these two options. So again, after if, you can always use were, but you don't have to. You can still use was where was normally should be used. Okay? So you can say, if I was rich, you can say, if I were rich. But if you have other persons like you, or the plural, you have to use were. So if you were rich, if we were rich, if they were rich. Okay, and the next sentence. He would have better grades if he studied more. Here, as you can see, the sentence doesn't start with if. Why? Well, because just like in Polish, in conditional sentences, you don't have to start the sentence with the word if. You can first start with the result, and then you can have the condition. So the order of these two parts of the sentence can be just the opposite, the other way around. So he would have better grades if he studied more, but if you don't like this order in the sentence, you can just change it. So you can say, if he studied more, he would have better grades. This is exactly the same thing. It's just about the order of these two parts of the sentence, but it doesn't make any difference. You just have to remember that after if you use past simple, in the other part you use would plus infinitive. Okay, and the last sentence. If he won a lottery, he would donate all the money. Again, after if you have past simple, in the second part of the sentence you have would plus the infinitive. All right, now an interesting thing is that in the second conditional, you can also, not always, but you can also use the continuous forms. So, instead of past simple, after if, you can use past continuous. Instead of would plus the infinitive, you can use would be plus gerund, plus ing form. So would be doing, would be going, would be playing. When do we use the continuous forms? Well, actually, we use the continuous forms if we want to say about things that would be happening right now, in this very moment. So, for example, I'm standing here now and talking to you, teaching English. So I can say, if I wasn't standing here, or if I wasn't teaching English now, or if I wasn't talking now, I would be doing something else. Maybe I would be watching TV, maybe I would be reading a book, maybe I would be sleeping. I don't know, okay? So if you are talking about an action, and it must be an action, it cannot be a state, but an action that would be happening right now in this very moment, just like in present continuous, you use the continuous form. So if plus past continuous and would be doing, so would be plus gerund. Examples. If she wasn't doing homework now, she would be watching TV. Okay, so after if you have past continuous, if she wasn't doing homework, in the second part you have would be ing, she would be watching TV now. And this sentence talks about actions that are happening right now or would be happening right now. However, I have to say that you don't have to use the continuous form in both parts of the sentence. No, you use it when you need to use it. So it very often happens that only one half of the conditional sentence will have the continuous form and the other will not. So look at the second sentence here. If I were rich, no continuous form here now. Why? Why no? Why not? Well, because we have the verb to be, and the verb to be, well, it's usually not used in the continuous form. So, so you don't use it here. So if I was rich, if I were rich, I wouldn't be asking you for money, but I am asking you for money now, okay? So this is again about an action that is happening right now. That's why we used, in this part we used the continuous form. So as you can see, only one half of the sentence is continuous. And the last sentence, if I weren't teaching now, I would probably be reading a book. And again, you have a conditional sentence, second conditional. Both parts of the sentence are in the continuous form. Why? Because we are talking about actions happening right now. If I weren't teaching now, and I am, I would probably be reading a book in this moment, in the same moment, in this very moment. Okay? So after if you have past continuous, in the second part, in the other part you have would be ing. All right. So this slide actually gives another example of what I was just saying, that you don't have to use the continuous form in the both parts of the sentence. So let's just look again at these examples. If I had a car, this I is not necessary there. So if I had a car, I wouldn't be going by train now. If I had a car, it's not in continuous form. Why not? Well, because I'm not talking about having a car now, but I'm talking about having a car in general. So if I had a car in general, yes, if I possessed a car, if I owned a car in general, I wouldn't be going by train now. This is situation now. We are talking about what would be happening right now. That's why you have the continuous form used. Second sentence, she wouldn't be waiting at the door if she had the key, which means that she is waiting at the door right now. Okay, and this is a continuous situation happening right now. That's why we have the continuous form, she wouldn't be waiting. In the second part, if she had the key, that means that she doesn't have the key in general at all, and that's why she's waiting. So, because we are talking about the general situation of not having the key, we don't use the continuous form. And the last sentence, if I were you, I would be studying now. Na twoim miejscu bym się teraz uczył. If I were you in general, not in this moment, but well, in general, if I were you, I would be studying right now. Okay, that's why you have the continuous form. All right, now another variation of the conditional two sentences is the fact that in this part where you have the result of the condition, instead of would, you can also use the modal verbs could and might. So, if I had more money, I could buy a house. What's the difference? Well, the difference is exactly the same as it is in Polish. Gdybym miał pieniądze, mógłbym kupić dom, but if we put the word would instead of could, we'll have a sentence, if I had the money, if I had more money, I would buy a house, kupiłbym dom. Czyli różnica jest taka, jak w języku polskim pomiędzy mógłbym kupić dom, a kupiłbym dom. Czyli w zasadzie niewielka, jest to tylko pewna różnica w stopniu prawdopodobieństwa. If he improved his stamina, he might win the race. Gdyby poprawił swoją wytrzymałość, to mógłby wygrać ten wyścig. I znowu, might, mogłoby tu też być could użyte, on mógłby, tak? Gdybyśmy użyli would, to zdanie wyrażałoby już większą pewność, wtedy oznaczałoby to, że on wygrałby ten wyścig, a nie mógłby. Także pamiętajcie, tak, że w tej połówce jakby wynikowej, rezultatowej w zdaniu warunkowym można zamiast would używać też could albo might, ale znaczenie jest troszkę inne, jest tam wtedy większa doza niepewności. All right, now we have reached the third conditional. It is the last of the basic conditionals. Again, as you can see on the slide, on the board, these sentences say what would have happened if, czyli co by było gdyby, czyli jest to znowu gdybanie, but these sentences refer to the past. Unlike the second conditional, in which sentences generally referred to the present, czyli co by było gdyby teraz, or to the future, co by było gdybym jutro, na przykład wygrał na loterii. So unlike the second conditional, in the third conditional we are talking exclusively about the past. Co by było gdyby w przeszłości, co automatycznie oznacza, że było inaczej. Tak? Mówimy o sytuacji, która się zdarzyła i potem gdybamy, co by było, gdyby było inaczej. I teraz, jakich się form używa w tym conditional? Well, all right, so let's speak English. After if, we use past perfect tense. So it's the tense which consists of had as an auxiliary verb and past participle, so the so-called third form of the third irregular form of the verb. So, for example, done. Yes. So we use past perfect after if, and in the other part of the conditional sentence we use would, have, and past participle. So would have done, would have gone, would have been, would have forgotten, and so on and so on. Okay. So let's take a look at some examples of this conditional. So if I had helped him, he would have survived. Gdybym mu pomógł wtedy, w przeszłości, to on by przeżył. You have to remember one thing. What you say in the third conditional is always opposite from what actually happened in the past. So if you have a sentence like this, if I had helped him, he would have survived, it automatically means that I didn't help him and he didn't survive. Okay? Gdybanie na temat przeszłości automatycznie oznacza, że ta przeszłość była inna niż to, co sobie gdybamy. Tak? No, tak wynika z logiki języka. Czyli gdybym mu pomógł, on przeżyłby, automatycznie oznacza, że mu nie pomogłem i on nie przeżył. Okay, let's take a look at the second sentence. If she hadn't stolen the money, she wouldn't have gone to prison. Czyli gdyby nie ukradła pieniędzy, to by nie poszła do więzienia. which means that she stole the money and she went to prison for that. Okay? And as you can see in both sentences, after if we have past perfect tense, if I had helped him, if she hadn't stolen the money. In the second part, you have would have plus past participle. He would have survived, she wouldn't have gone to prison. And similarly to the second conditional, in the third conditional, you can also use the continuous form. So instead of past perfect tense after if, you can use past perfect continuous tense. Instead of would have done, you can use would have been doing. When do we use the continuous forms in the third conditional? Well, as you can see on the board, if the action that we are talking about was a continuous action in the past. Okay? So let's take a look at some examples. If he hadn't been driving so fast, he wouldn't have crashed. So if he hadn't been driving so fast, gdyby nie jechał tak szybko, it automatically means that he was driving fast. So it was a past continuous action. Yes, he was driving fast and he crashed. And we create conditional sentence referring to this situation. If he hadn't been driving so fast, so you have past perfect continuous. And the second part, as you can see, the second part of this sentence is not with a continuous form. Why? Because he crashed. Crashing is not a continuous action. When you crash, when driving, it's a sudden action, okay, which happens very quickly and you don't really consider it a continuous action. That's why you don't use continuous tense, continuous form here. Second sentence. If he had been busy, he wouldn't have been sleeping. Czyli, gdyby był zajęty, gdyby naprawdę był zajęty, to by w tamtym momencie nie spał. Tak? Wyobraźmy sobie sytuację, że poprosiliśmy go o pomoc, a on powiedział, że nie może, bo jest zajęty, i chwilę przed tym, chwilę po tym facet dalej spał. Tak? I mówimy, że gdyby naprawdę był zajęty, to by nie spał. Spanie w przeszłości było tutaj czynnością przeszłą, ciągłą. He was sleeping. That's why this part of the conditional sentence that refers to this past continuous action is with the continuous form. So he wouldn't have been sleeping. The first part is not continuous because we have the verb be here, and the verb be is not really an action, so you can't really use it here as a continuous form or in a continuous form. And the last sentence, she would have been listening if he hadn't been so tired. Okay, it should be he would have been listening if he hadn't been so tired. Czyli wyobraźmy sobie sytuację, że chłopak siedział na lekcji, był strasznie zmęczony, z tego zmęczenia trochę przysypiał i za bardzo nie słuchał. On nie słuchał. He wasn't listening. So this is past continuous action, let's say. So that's why this part of the conditional is also continuous. He would have been listening. Słuchałby, tak? Przez całą lekcję, czyli czynność ciągła. Natomiast druga część, on był zmęczony, czyli gdyby nie był zmęczony, ona już nie jest czynnością, bo bycie zmęczonym to nie jest czynność, więc ta połówka i tak nie może być w formie ciągłej. Tak? Pamiętajcie, że czasownik być w większości przypadków zdecydowanej, pewnie 99%, on nie oznacza żadnej czynności, tylko oznacza stan, a stanów się nie wyraża formami typu continuous. Ok. I teraz na koniec jeszcze jedna ważna rzecz. Okay. When you have to do the conditional sentences, there are basically two problems. First problem is, what are the different forms in the particular conditional sentence? How to remember all these forms? Every conditional has different forms. Well, the basic and probably the best way is to make it more systematic. So take a look at this board now. In the zero conditional, it's easy to remember. It's always present simple and only present simple in both parts of the sentence. Easy, piece of cake. Conditional sentences type 1. If present simple, second part will, modal or imperative, so tryb rozkazujący. And then, if you look at the second and third conditional, you will see that we are going back in time, or we are changing the tenses according to the rule of the sequence of tenses. So in the second conditional, after if you have past tenses, past simple or past continuous. In the third conditional, after if you have past perfect tenses. Czyli tak jak widzicie, one się tak ładnie, te conditionale, układają od pierwszego do trzeciego. Po if mamy teraźniejszy, przeszły, zaprzeszły. Present simple, past simple or continuous. Past perfect, simple or continuous. Tak? Czyli łatwiej to zapamiętać, jeżeli pamiętacie tak, że te czasy od pierwszego conditionala po if schodzą sobie w dół według następstwa czasów, czyli present simple, past simple lub continuous, past perfect, continuous. Natomiast ta druga połówka też widać, że jakaś jest tam prawidłowość. W pierwszym conditionalu jest will, w drugim jest would plus bezokolicznik, w trzecim jest would have done. Oczywiście zamiast would zawsze można użyć could albo might. Okay. The last question, the last problem is which conditional sentence I have to use. For example, you have to make a sentence transformation and you have to build a conditional sentence. Which one do you have to use? Well, this is my suggestion. Of course, you can have your own suggestion. First of all, is try to build this sentence in Polish so that you know what kind of sentence you actually want to have in English, what kind of sentence you want to create, to make. Then look at the word if. If you translate this into Polish and the word if means jeżeli or jeśli, well, it must be zero or first conditional. If it's constant situation, must be the zero conditional. If it's one specific situation in the past, must be the first conditional. If the word if means gdyby, then you know it's the second conditional or the third conditional, and then it's easy to distinguish them. If we are talking about the past, must be the third conditional. If you're not talking about the past, it means you're talking about the present or future, must be the second conditional. This is my tip. This is my way of doing it, the way I did it when I was learning this. So maybe you will find it helpful. All right, so thank you very much. I hope you found this little presentation useful. In the second lesson today, we are going to talk about mixed conditionals. Thank you very much and see you in about 10 minutes. Goodbye.